Today's video is all about pruning knockout roses. It's mid-March. It's the perfect time to prune them. I'm in Zone 7 in New Jersey. There are some areas where you might be pruning them earlier, say in February. There are some areas where you might do it later if you're further north. But this is the time to do it. And the time to do it, some people say, is when you see the forsythia blooming. That could be a good mark. Others say when you start to see little buds forming on them. And I'll give you a close-up of that so you see what that looks like. I'm Laura from Garden Sanity. Let's get started. Supplies needed: large bucket with a garbage bag, smaller little guy that I put all the refuse in. I use my handy garden kneeler, which also doubles as a seat if you flip it over. I'm going to do a separate video on this because honestly it's been a lifesaver to me. My hand pruners, which are bypass pruners by Fiskars. They don't sponsor this, I just like them. Same with the loppers. They're also Fiskars, nothing fancy, but I really like them. And one last important item: gloves. These are a must. I use these gloves, love these. I'll put a link to them in the description box. They're nitrile coated on this side, they're cloth on this side. You can use rose gloves that are a little bit heavier. Sometimes they're leather, sometimes they're suede. But these seem to do the job. I'm kind of careful. But if you're not sure if you're going to be careful because of all the thorns, definitely get some heavier duty gloves. Don't just use your bare hands. So here's an example of some of the buds that you can see. And they're actually, if you look closely, they're popping up all over the shrub. So it's definitely time to prune. As you can see, this particular knockout rose bush, as I showed you in my fall garden tour, was huge and lovely. And it bloomed all the way through, if I remember correctly, into November. If all these beautiful buds are coming out, aren't you cutting all of them off? And then where's the new growth going to be? Again, trust me on this. Trust the good folks at Knockout Roses. The growth will come back. These buds show you that it's basically saying, hey, I'm ready to grow. Here you see some of the damage from the pandemic rabbits, as I call them. It's not too bad, and luckily they didn't seem to really get any other ones, at least so far that I've seen. So that's good. The other thing I want to point out to you while I'm down this low is the difference in size of all the stems of the knockout rose bush. Obviously this one, this fat one, is the oldest, or one of the oldest. This is a newer one that you see here with the rabbit damage. You also see some other ones that I have pruned in previous years because I try to keep the plant a little bit airy. You don't want too many things crowding up the middle of the plant, so that the best success with your roses is going to be if they're nice and airy, they've got a good airflow, there's no infection sets in, they just do great that way. So in the garden, when these are all blooming, they almost look like one continuous shrub. But there is a difference between them. This one in particular, it grew shorter this year, partly because I kept it that way. It seemed to have a lot of witch's brooms on it. I think that's what they're called. It basically is almost like an extra diseased branch that almost grows out of control. It looks pretty, but it's not good to have. People say that when you have that, what you should do is just get rid of the rose bush because it'll infect the others. That has not happened to me, but what I am going to do with this particular one is I'm going to trim this one all the way down to about 12 inches. I'm going to see if it helps with the regrowth and maybe helps make a healthier plant. Whereas this guy looks pretty good, so I'm going to just trim him down probably by about a half. I usually go down to about 2 feet, and that may seem low, but man, these get taller than me. And this one, I like to keep super tall. It's just, I just love this plant. This one in particular grows nice and high. And yeah, it does cover our ornamental maple that's kind of hiding back there, but I can't help it. I love these. So the goal is to have bushier, healthier plants just by doing a pruning. And whether, again, you do it just a little bit by 1/2 to 2/3, sometimes people just do 1/3, or pruning it all the way down. Either way, you're going to get really nice regrowth. And then in the summer, all you'll have to do is deadhead if you want. What is it that you're pruning? There are several things to look for. Now, first, in a bush like this that's so tall, I'm just going for height first. So if you see, this is how tall it is. And then if you see, I'm trying to get down to like this guy. But the other thing that you're going to encounter as you're going, and I'm just stopping to tell you now, is you want to also remove any crossing branches. Do you see these two? And if you look, you see that little bit of white? Well, that's because it spent a season going like this, back and forth in the wind. So when that happens, if you see, the outer bark, the protective covering is removed, and that can let some fungal disease in. So it's up to you which cane you want to keep, whether you keep this one or this one. That's a preference up to you. Now, what I'm going to do is follow this cane, this one, all the way down. So the cane goes all the way to where you see, look for the green. Okay, you see how it goes all the way down to that? So I'm going to cut it right there, and you can see that little white area, this guy. That's where I previously cut. And the reason I'm going to cut that is because it's in the middle of the shrub. So I want to make sure the middle of the shrub is kept as airy as possible. So here's a good example of a previously pruned limb, stem, whatever you want to call it, cane as some people call it, that I've pruned over the years. You can see all the different times I've cut it, and it's always been to this level, right? And then you see this really old branch. In fact, that probably, see, that'll just come right off, no big deal. These little guys, although they grew nice, they're kind of spindly. I'm going to cut those off. Here again is another stem leaning against the branch. You can see the bark on the main branch is kind of rubbing, so that'll come off. But you see, after you do this, and you should do it every year, but after you do it for a while, you'll see your old cuts, and it'll just make it easier, because then you know exactly where you want to cut back to. Just a good idea. And in the middle, same thing. This is an older cane, and all this stuff was new. I mean, I'm not kidding when I say don't be afraid to prune, because all this growth that you see above, say here, was all new growth. So you want to remove diseased branches, dead branches, spindly branches. You might not be sure if things are dead or not, and that's okay. That's happened to me, and what I end up doing is then in the springtime I notice, hey, there's no buds on these. Nothing's growing, cut it off. Like I said, these roses are very easy, very forgiving. All right, let me get back to it. Guess what? I finally got a hair clip. It might look silly, but who cares? Bless the inventor of the hair clip, right? The other thing I'm going to do is I'm just throwing stuff in a pile. When I normally do this, I do it in a nice relaxed way, and I prune something off and I cut it into little pieces and I throw it in a bucket, and I'm nice and neat about it as I'm working. But if I'm to do that now, you'd turn the video off. So here is the shrub, all cut down. There's no crossing branches. There's no spindly branches. There's no branches pointing inward. When possible, I tried to find buds that would be pointing this way, outward rather than inward. But it doesn't really matter. Some people do that, and I don't know, it can be super anal, but I guess it works. And I don't mean to call anybody super anal, because I'm impressed when people can do that. I just don't have the time. I'm too busy. I'm too busy nicely pruning up that pile into nice little pieces. Anyway, this is what this shrub looks like. So it's like, oh my God, I can't believe you cut it back this far. Just a reminder, Look how it looks in the summer. Every summer it's this beautiful. Just for comparison again, so this is the one that I did that easily gets over 5 feet tall. And this is its buddy that gets almost as large. So I just want to tell you, don't be afraid to go from this to this. Trust me on this. Do not be afraid. This one, as I mentioned before, is very low to the ground. I want to see if that regenerates and does something a little bit better. This one I did probably about between 2.5 and 3 feet. And the one on the left I did about 3 feet. This is the knockout rose that is planted in one of our side beds. And this was transplanted from the middle bed. So this is going to be its second full season. And as you can see, it seemed kind of spindly. It didn't really do that great. I'm actually going to cut this one down to about 12 inches. Hopefully it will spur it to grow a lot of new stems and come back nice and bushy. And that's what a lot of this growth will do when you cut it down that severely. So this is the lamppost bed, and this is the knockout rose, which I feel very bad. I called it sad looking, I think in a previous video. It's not that it's sad, it's just that it always starts out great and then it peters out. So I'm going to give this one also a rejuvenation pruning down to about 12 inches and we'll see how it does. It has a lot of nice healthy branches. It looks really good, but for some reason it peters out. So I don't know. I'm going to just try it and see how it goes. This is a knockout rose that is in the center bed right in front of our crepe myrtle tree. It's just a misshapen mess. And that's my fault. I've just sort of been pruning willy-nilly when I can, and I don't notice it as much in the summer because, you know, you've got the pinky winky hydrangeas blooming, you've got the grasses all nice and tall and leaves on the crepe myrtle, so you just kind of have a nice little bit of color coming through with the roses, so I've never been that concerned about it. But I'm going to also do this one down to 12 inches, just to give you more of a perspective. I'm backing up, hope I don't trip. So that's where that rose is sited. By the way, look at the previous video I did on pandemic rabbits. Do you see the difference in the two yuccas? The one on the right, they decimated. The one on the left, they're starting on. This is the other side bed, and I have 3 knockout roses going up the side nearest the driveway. I pruned these in the fall, and that's what I usually do. Is in the past I've always done my knockout rose pruning in the fall. So I decided to do these 3 in the fall just to do a little bit of an experiment. I'm going to leave these alone and see how they compare to the ones that I'm pruning now as the summer goes on. So we'll do a little fall versus spring pruning and see which does better. The last step is to add slow release organic fertilizer. I use Rose Tone, as do most people. It's by Espoma, a great product. I'll link to it in the description box below. I'm not going to put it down today because it's not supposed to rain for about a week, so I'd rather wait for it to rain. I'll put it down. That's what I like to do with all fertilizer in the spring, is I wait for a good Mother Nature rain. Just makes it a lot easier. I'll leave you with a couple of crocuses, and I'll see you real soon with the next pruning project.